Cool. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Habibina Muhammad. Welcome to everyone who's watching on the stream today. We have a short session today for you as part of a series of live streams we're doing this month to help educate people around major themes when it comes to zakat and the questions people usually have. Today's session is around missed zakat. So for those of us who might have come to the knowledge of zakat or the rules of zakat late in our lives and realize we have years to pay back for, our guest today is going to help us how to navigate that and how best to approach that. And to introduce our guest, very briefly, myself, I'm Jamal Mahmood. I'm Head of Supporter Relations at NZF. And we'll get into NZF at the end a bit and share a bit about our resources. But to introduce our main speaker today and our special guest, it's Mufti Liaqat Zaman, who was born and raised in Birmingham Sharif. He's a graduate of Jamia Ulum al-Islamiyya in Banuri Town and Jamia Tayyibah in Karachi. And since his return from Pakistan, he has been delivering lectures, sermons, and courses for a number of years. And his desire to reconnect all Muslims, especially the youth, with the teachings of the Quran and Sunnah, led him to begin his YouTube channel and anchor podcasts as a means of bridging the disconnect between the public and scholars. So welcome to you, Mufti Liaqat, as well. I hope I've done you justice there with the intro, but without further ado, we'll let you begin today's session.
Jazakallah khair, brother, mashallah. I never heard that kind of introduction before, but alhamdulillah. Okay, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. First of all, I think I'll start off with just explaining a little bit about background of zakat and its importance in Islam. So first and foremostly, when it comes to zakat, as all of us we know, I mean, the number of times in the Quran that Allah mentions praying, giving zakat, that zakat has actually become something which is almost, you can say, hand in hand with faith, iman. So the idea that a person, they give their zakat, the idea that a person has to, their hard-earned money, there's a small amount of it which belongs to those in the community that are mentioned in the Quran, those who are vulnerable, those who are financially require stability. These are individuals that it's like, you can almost say, it's incumbent upon every single Muslim to be able to financially support them. So zakat is the second, or it's the you can almost say it's like the second of the two. Pray your salat and give your zakat. And zakat is such a beautiful word because zakat does not just mean, when I was first introduced to this word, when I was first practicing when I was young, and I used to hear people say, you give alms, you have to give charity. Zakat is not really, doesn't mean charity. Zakat means purification. It's a beautiful word because it means for a person, in order for their wealth to be purified of all the, you can almost say, spiritual rust that has built up on that wealth, it's necessary for a person to give this amount. And all of us, as we know, all of us, in different times of our lives, we have situations, financial situations that can burden us, and we don't even realize sometimes. Just like there's a spiritual, just like there's a physical realm that we live in that has, purity in there and filth in there as well. And we never want to see any filth on our bodies, so we are very particular about cleansing ourselves. There's also an element of purity, spiritual purity, and spiritual filth as well, which Allah, out of His sheer mercy, He guides us of how to purify ourselves through this way. So zakat is one of those things that we have to learn as a Muslim. There's no escape from it. Alhamdulillah, organizations like National Zakat Foundation make this so easy for the average Muslim to just simply just be able to give your zakat hassle free. Now, zakat in the hadith, zakat has been emphasized a lot. So for example, like there's a narration where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, if a person pays their zakat, if a person, in fact, I'll mention a verse of the Quran. This is the scary verse. I didn't want to mention this verse, but I'll mention this verse. This is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who hoard away their wealth, right? وَالَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ. Those who hoard away their wealth and they don't spend it in the path of Allah, they don't spend it in the way of Allah, then give them glad tidings of a severe torment, severe punishment. Their wealth will be taken, and in one narration, this is where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, their wealth will be taken and it will come in the form of a serpent, a big snake, a big serpent that will wrap itself around an individual and will say to it, it will bite the individual and say that I am your wealth that you are hoarding away. And this is a very scary thing for many of us as well, because many of us live in a very commercialized society, very sort of like a selfish, almost you can say, society where it's all about earning for yourself. It's all about building up your portfolio. It's about building up your assets. But that's the thing that Islam reminds us, like Allah says in the Quran as well, that each and every single one of us is being distracted by our wealth. When we give zakat, it's like that the road works in the middle of the road. It breaks our concentration. It breaks our normal routine. And now we really have to think about the others of the community as well. And giving zakat is also considered to be one of the signs of the successful believers in the Quran as well. Yeah, so they give their zakat. Hum lizzakati fa'ilun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. In fact, zakat's benefits are so, like, we on a small micro level, when we kind of think about zakat, we tend to think about zakat as simply someone coming to your mosque, or maybe someone coming to a local community and doing a collection for a particular organization, and that's probably the exposure that we get to zakat. But in reality, the zakat is such a dynamic law or a system, a concept that Allah has sent down in the Quran, that it will, if it's acted upon properly, it will literally eradicate need in society. Need in society can be eradicated in this way, and it just doesn't just eradicate the need for poverty, because poverty is simply it's just one of those like obstacles in people's way. Once you remove the obstacle of poverty out of people's way, people will become leaders. People will become, high aspiring parents. They'll become entrepreneurs. They'll become people who will develop the society, become people who will have concern for their fellow brothers and sisters, not just in their own communities, but around the world as well. So zakat is something which is very dynamic. And like I said, that's on a micro level when we look at it. But on the macro level, it's something which will help the Muslims in the long run. This is like their almost, you can say, like resuscitation. You're resuscitating the ummah through financial support. And as we know today, it's not a very nice thing to say, but money makes the world go round, right? And if money makes the world go round and people are in need of money, then definitely, it's important for us to understand how this works. So I'm going to give you an example. There's a narration where I'll give you a gist of the narration. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was the Khalifa, and he sent out many governors. So in the olden days, what used to happen was you wouldn't have National Zakat Foundation. What you'd have is the government would have the sole responsibility of collecting the main types of zakat from the people. And Umar radiallahu anhu, he sends out governors to different cities. One of the governors he sends out is Mu'adh ibn Jabal. So Mu'adh ibn Jabal is actually previously sent out by the Prophet ﷺ to Yemen, right in the south of Arabian Peninsula, and he is collecting the zakats from there. That was his duty. And now he's collected the zakats. He's come to Medina now, and Umar radiallahu anhu said to him, "What's happened?" And he said, "Oh, I brought zakat." And he said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I distributed all the zakat that I could collect from the people, and then I had 1/3 left, and there was no one there who was eligible to receive the zakat." So Umar said, "Okay, keep it with me." The next year comes now, and Mu'adh ibn Jabal, the same thing. Because remember, the Prophet ﷺ, before he sent Mu'adh to Yemen, he gave him some important advice. And that advice was that he said, take from their rich and give to their poor. That's what he said. Right? You redistribute the zakat amongst the individuals, so that one community now can become almost you can say self-sustained. So he's gone, he's distributed the zakat, and he's got 2/3 left. So he comes back to Omar and he says, got 2/3 left. So Omar said, okay. And then the next year comes, he brings all the zakat. And Omar said, what happened? And he said, literally, this year there was no one to receive zakat. So you imagine if zakat is distributed in a correct manner, in a really good way, in a structured manner, you can eradicate the need in the society, and that's what the aim of these short little reminders and workshops are, which is for us to be able to understand how important zakat is and how we can give our zakat in the right way. Now, first of all, before I actually go into the miscalculations of zakat, what we have to understand about zakat is what do we have to give zakat on? Like I own a watch, and I own clothes, and I own a mobile phone, and I own a laptop, and I might own some other accessories, and they might have value. Do I have to give zakat on those or not? I've got a bike. Do I have to give zakat on my bike? I might have, I don't know, some savings in a bank account or on PayPal even. Do I have to give zakat on those? Here's where I think a lot of people, they tend to forget, or they tend to overlook the importance of every Muslim has to be very, very, very particular. You almost have to be like, you can say, you have to investigate your own situation, right? You have to look into your own situation. I mean, it's not a nice thing to say, but like HMRC would look into your situation, right? You've got to kind of look into your situation in every single thing. What do I own? Is there zakat in this? Do I want this to, on the day of judgment, to become a means of my sorrow and grief? So if you don't want that to happen, you need to learn about this. So the easier thing that, I mean, National Zakat Foundation has is a very a nice breakdown. Generally, when I studied zakat in the books of fiqh, zakat is broken down into 8 categories. You have 8 different types of assets where you give zakat, like camels and cows and goats and horses and gold, silver, land produce, and business, trade, inventory. Well, I'm not going to go into that. All I'm going to tell you is 5 important things that you need to check if you've got those assets, right? So if you possess assets of these 5 things, then you have to give zakat. So, or potentially you have to give zakat. So the first and foremost is if you have gold and silver. Okay, so gold and silver is something which is obviously, many of us might not have gold and silver. It's that type of gold and silver that you have which is tangible, right? So if you've got like gold and silver which is in the form of gold plating, or you've got, I don't know, you've got computers, and inside those computers there's gold in the chips, that's not considered to be an asset. It has to be something which is tangible. Like, for example, a person might have gold jewelry, or a silver pen, or silver cutlery as well. So it could be anything of that nature. So according to the Hanafi school, the position of the Hanafi school is gold and silver in any shape and form is a zakat asset, right? And other schools like the Shafis and the Malikis and others, they have a position where if a woman has gold or silver and she wears that gold regularly, then there's no zakat on that. However, I'll be explaining to you predominantly from the Hanafi school of position. So there would be zakat on that. How much of that would you have to have for your zakat to be necessary? Now, this is based upon what we call the nisab, the threshold of gold, and the threshold of silver, right? So there's a particular threshold that you have to have, which is 87.48 grams of gold, 87.48 grams, right? So if you've got 87.48 grams of just raw gold, right, not the value of the jewelry, we're talking about raw gold here, in what we call scrap value, right? So if you've got 87.48 grams of gold, you work that out, and potentially that's going to be what you're going to add to your asset. So let's say there's a person that's got, I don't know, gold bangles or gold necklace, or maybe some silver ring, or some other accessories that are made from that. You basically work it out. And the same with silver as well. So silver is 613.35. So 613.35 grams of silver, right? So if you've got that much grams of silver, then again, you 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 have an asset of zakat basically. Now, if you have less than that, then you're not you don't have the asset, you don't have the threshold. Basically, you haven't reached that limit. Now, how would you work out the value of your gold and your silver? So there's two ways that you can work out the value of gold and silver. Option one, which is the more accurate option, is you try to get in contact with a reliable jewelry store, preferably maybe a Muslim one, so they know the rules of zakat, and then you get them to work it out for you, right? So the gold might be 24 karat gold, it could be 22 karat gold, it could be 18, and so forth, right? So you get them to work it out, and the same with the silver. Now, if a person is not familiar with this, or maybe doesn't want to go to the jewelry store for whatever reason, then there's a second option, which is, I call it the cowboy option. Yeah, you can do a bit of a cowboy thing here, and that is you go to your kitchen and you might have scales in your kitchen, and you put the gold on the scales, you weigh the gold. Now, here is where I call it cowboy, because you might not be able to exactly work out the amount of gold. You might have to overestimate how much gold you actually have, because you might have precious stones in that jewelry, which does not have to be given a zakat on. So it's not an asset. So anyway, you've taken your gold, you overestimate it slightly, and the silver, you weigh the silver. And then what you do is you go online and you go to Scrap Gold UK, if you're in the UK, that is. Scrap Gold and Scrap Silver. And there they'll give you the latest figures of that. And then what you have to do is, this is the important part now. So you're going to work out your zakat on the day of your zakat now, right? So this is known as your zakat anniversary, right? So you have your zakat anniversary. So let's say, for example, like your zakat anniversary was on the 1st of Ramadan, right? So therefore, when the next 1st of Ramadan comes, that day, the 1st of Ramadan, is the day you have to do all the calculating. Right? So it's very important to make a note of the day of your zakat. It works usually with the lunar calendar. So the 1st of Ramadan, right? I know this is my anniversary of zakat, right? When the next time the 1st of Ramadan comes, this is where I'm going to check, do I have assets or not? And that's where I'm going to make a note, and I'm going to say, okay, now I have this much, and I'm going to work out the value of the gold on this day and the silver on this day, and keep a note of that. Now, you can give your zakat at any date later. That's not a problem. You don't have to give your zakat on the 1st. I can give my zakat on the 10th if I want, even after Ramadan. That's up to me. But the calculation must be done on your zakat anniversary. So this working out the anniversary is something which is very important when you've missed calculations of the past. So I'll come to the calculations of the past and working out the missed zakat. But for now, this is what it is. Okay, and number two, right? So gold and silver, and then number two is cash and receivables. So cash and receivables is something that you also have to give zakat on. So how does that work then? So basically, what you do is you figure out how much cash you have, in all of your assets, right? So how much cash do you have in your bank account? How much cash do you have in savings accounts, current account, in your pockets, in your wallets and purse? Maybe, I don't know, sometimes you have foreign currency, right? You might have, I don't know, gone to for Hajj and Umrah, and you might have riyals, right? Just like for emergency cases, just saved. You'd have to give zakat on that. PayPal account, anything of that nature, you have to work out how much you've got, and then totally all. Again, you work out how much you've got on your zakat anniversary. So our zakat anniversary, for example, is going to be the 1st of Ramadan. Yeah. So on the 1st of Ramadan, I'm going to write down, right, this is how much cash in total I've got at the moment, the current cash I've got. And receivables. Receivables is important as well. It basically means if you have ever given someone any cash, you've lent it out to someone and they owe you. So what you have to do is you have to give the zakat of that, right? So what you do is you got two options with the receivables. The first option is the easiest thing to do, which is what I do. If I've ever lent out money to someone, I simply just make a note of it with my assets. So let's say, for example, like I've worked out all of my savings, and my savings, I've got £1,000, right? So I write down £1,000. And then I've worked out the amount of money that I've lent out to people. So let's say I've lent out to people another £1,000. So altogether, I've got £1,000 in immediate savings that I have, and £1,000 which I've lent out to other people. So then I just simply just work that out. I'll write that down there as well. and then I give the zakat on both 1,000, right? The 1,000 that I've got and the 1,000 that I've lent out. That's a bit of an easy way to do it. The other way to do it is you can actually wait until you receive that money back. So let's say I get the money back after 10 years. Then what you do is you backtrack all of your dates, right? So you go back all the way from the first time that you gave the money, and then you work out the zakat for every year, minusing 2.5% from every year, right? Progressively. So if I had £1,000 and I had it lent out for 10 years to someone, when I receive it back after 10 years, what I do is for the first year, I'm going to give 2.5% of 1,000, which is £25. Now, the next year, when I work that one out, I'm going to minus the 25 from 1,000. Yeah, so 1,000 minus 25, 975. So 975, I'm going to work out 2.5% of 975. And then the next year, I'm going to progressively decrease. So 975 minus whatever it is, right? So I'm not good at math, so I can't tell you the answer on the top of my head, but you guys understand, inshallah. So that's basically how. So there's two options there. I would opt for the first one just to be on the safe side, just to save you all that hassle. Okay, so that's cash, that is. Now, if you've ever given someone cash and you have no idea whether you're going to get it back or not, you've lost hope you're going to get it back, then just assume that there's no zakat there, right? So there's no more zakat on that. So this is if you have given out your zakat, or you've not zakat, you've given out money to someone, you've lent it out to them, and you've lost all hope that you're going to ever get that money back now. So in that case, what happens? Then that's fine, right? You don't have to give zakat on that. In fact, even if you get it back, you don't have to work out the past years of zakat on it, right? So that's a kind of like a bonus thing for you. Like you lost all hope, and now all of a sudden you got it back. Okay, so cash is done now. Now the next one is number 3 is business assets, right? So business assets. So when we say business assets, what do we mean by business assets? So business assets basically means any stock that you have in business, which is inventory or which is cash receivables. Yeah, so inventory, cash receivables for goods, then you have to give zakat on these two things, right? These are the only major two things in a business that you have to give it on. So remember that: cash, liquid assets, and any receivables in exchange for goods. So let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, I've got a business. This business is called LZ business. So this is Liaquat Zaman. So this is my business called LZ business, right? So LZ business is worth £100,000, right? So we've got £100,000 business. So how do I work out the zakat of a £100,000 business? So what I do is I work out how much stock I've got. So I work that out, and let's say, for example, I've got stock that is worth, I don't know, £5,000. Okay, £5,000 worth of stock, and I've got money which I'm owed, credit that people owe me. They've bought things off me, and now they owe me money, and I've got £5,000 worth of receivables. Now that's 5 plus 5, which is 10. It's an easy number, even I can work that out. So you got that 10 now, and then you got 90,000, which is basically the value of the property and the value of fixed assets in the business. That you don't have to give zakat on that 90,000, right? Because that's fixed assets. That is, what you have to give zakat on is the 10,000. So I work out the 10,000, 2.5% of 10,000, right? And that's what I give zakat on. So 2.5% of 10,000 is going to be £250. Yeah. So £250 is going to be my zakat on that business. Right? Very easy, very straightforward. And you can simply just use that calculation to work out the business or the value of any stock in a business. Okay. So that's how you work out the zakat in a business now. Now, I know sometimes some people are going to say, like, we don't know exactly how much we have. So what I would suggest is if you're not sure in how much, then what you do is if you ask your accountant, if you've got an accountant, you can ask your accountant to work out the money flow, how much is coming in and how much is going out, and then roughly they can give you an estimate of the kind of money you're dealing with, right? So you only have to look for liquid assets and inventory. Yeah, so So in liquid assets, including receivables, and the inventory, the value of the stock that you've got. That's all you have to look at, right? And usually your accountant can give you a good figure on that. You might have to overestimate sometimes. Now, sometimes you might have a business where you don't know the value of the stock. So what should you do in that situation? So in that situation, I would say is try to use a rough estimate of what you think the stock is valued at. Do a rough estimate, slightly overestimate, and use that figure. Inshallah, that figure should be fine. That's now your third issue. Now your third thing. Oh yeah. Now, like some people might have small house businesses. They might have like at home. They might bake and sell cakes, or they might do these kind of art and crafts, creativity things they sell on Etsy and these various websites. So again, you give zakat on in that situation the things that you purchased, the raw materials that you purchased, give zakat on that basically. Right. So you work out how much raw materials you have, its value, and then 2.5% of that. Okay, so that should be straightforward, inshallah. And if you've got any questions, you can always, inshallah, ask questions. And at the end, inshallah, I'll try to answer all of your questions. The fourth asset now, remember we said there's 5. So gold and silver, cash and receivables, business stock and receivables. And the fourth one now is investments, equity, shares, investments. When it comes to investments, I always say to people, look, investments are simply just, a business. So if you've understood the business one, you'll understand investments very, very easily. And that is because, let's say, for example, I've got my LZ business, and let's say we've got brother Jamal. So Jamal, he comes to me and he owns in my business, he owns 10% of the business, right? So he owns 10% of LZ International. Let's call it LZ International. So he owns 10% of LZ International. Jamal wants to find out how much zakat does he have to give on this 10% that he owns. So the answer to this is very straightforward. Once Jamal has found out how much liquid assets I have in the business and how much inventory I have in the business, then what happens is he simply works out 10% of that. So if you remember, we said I've got £5,000 of business assets and I've got £5,000 of liquid assets, including receivables, which is £10,000. So therefore, Jamal owns 10% of that £10,000. So 10% of 10,000, again, I mean, I'm not good at maths, but I can work this out, which is 1,000, right? So that 1,000 that you've got, so Jamal is now going to work out 2.5% of that 1,000. That's basically his share in the business. Now, you might be saying to me, well, that's a very simplified version of it, but what if you own, stocks and shares in a big company? So how does that work then? So if you have stocks and shares in a big company, in that case, then what you do is you ask them, this is where the easy part is. You simply just ask them if they can provide you with the relevant data that you want. So you want to ask them for liquid assets and you want to ask them for, inventory, if they've got inventory. Now, sometimes, for example, someone might come to me and say to me, I've got shares in a business. First question I asked him, why did you buy the shares for? What's the purpose of the shares? Did you buy the shares for the purpose of quick resale? Is it there because you want simply just to buy and short term sell it on? Yeah. Or do you want to keep it long term, right, and get dividends from it, or maybe hold on to it for a few years? If it's the first option, if you're simply there because you want to buy and then you're just waiting for a little while, then you're going to sell, then you have to give zakat on the entire value, not just you don't just work out 10% of 10,000. You have to work out 10% of 100,000, right? So if Jamal was basically 10% owner of LZ International, and he simply wants to hold on to it just for a short while, in the sense that he wants to sell it on as a investment, as a sale, quick sale, then in that case he would have to give zakat on 10% of the whole business. So 10% of the whole business is 10,000. Now 2.5% of that he's going to give zakat. And that's why, because that stock has now become, for him, that stock has now become entirely, all of it has now become zakatable, right? It's a zakat asset. The entire thing is because everything is a business for that for him. However, if he chose option number 2 and he said to me, "No, I want to hold on to it. I want dividends," then in that case, then he simply has to ask for the liquid assets and he has to ask for the the inventory, right? So he works that out and then he works out 10% of that. And just like we said, so the £10,000 is the value of the zakatable assets in this business. He owns 10% of that, which is £1,000, and he gives zakat of 2.5% of 1,000, which is £25, right? And that's how you're going to do it. Now, let's say you own business, you've got business in BT, or sorry, shares in BT, or you got shares in Apple or in Google or something like that. It's a bit difficult to kind of work out the zakat because the company has so many branches and so many different departments, and then the details are quite complicated for some people. So, so some of the scholars at National Zakat Foundation, Mufti Faraz and others, they've actually come out with a very easy way for people to work out the zakat. So what they say is basically, you can simply use the 25% benchmark. What does the 25% benchmark mean? Well, you take the whole business, you take 25% of it, and then you work out the 2.5% from that 25%. So let's say you've got shares in LZ International. You don't know exactly how much liquid assets I've got and how much inventory I've got. So you work out 25% of the whole value, which is 25% of 100,000 is 25,000. And then that 25,000, now you're going to work out 2.5% of 25,000. Okay, so 2.5%, 25,000, and that's going to be now the zakat you're going to give, right? So this is the other option. This is a bit overestimation as well, but that's basically how this would work. Now, you know, things would differ from company to company. There might be some companies that are investing in gold or silver, for example, right? Or they're investing in real estate, right? Just building real estate, selling it off like that. Then zakat would differ from thing to thing. So what I would suggest is you can ask the questions here if you've got a specific question, or you can read more about it on National Zakat Foundation's website. They've got a lot of details and scenarios, explanations there, inshallah, as well. Okay, the last, number 5, is giving zakat on pension. So how does zakat on pensions work? So zakat on pensions basically is going to work is where you have. So let me break it down for you so you understand it very easily. So let's say, for example, I work for a business, I work for an organization, and this organization says to me, right, would you like to participate in your pension? We're going to take a small amount from your wages every month, and we're going to invest it in whatever we're going to invest it in, and then after so many years, when you retire, you're going to get a pension, right? So this is one way, right? The second way that they might ask you is they might say to you, right, would you like a small amount of your shares or your wages, salary, to go into a pot, and you can decide where you want that pot to be invested. Okay, well, you can decide where you want that pot to be invested. So this second type, this is where it's zakatable, right? This is the zakatable one, right? So you call this, defined contribution scheme, right? So a defined contribution scheme versus a defined benefit scheme. Zakat is necessary on a defined contribution scheme, right? As opposed to a defined benefit scheme. So defined contribution scheme is the one where they send you a letter, they tell you where would you like your investment to be made. They give you you have your pot fund, and you have a fund manager, and that fund manager maybe it's a company, it's an organization. They will simply take whichever option you want, and they'll invest the money in there for you. That is where you have to give zakat on your pension. All other types of pensions, state pension, NHS pension, teachers pensions, defined benefit scheme pensions, there's no zakat on them, right? So those are no zakat. It's only this specific scenario is where you have control of where the money is being invested, right? That's where you are now, eligible to give zakat. So how does that work now? So it's simply now, once you work out which pension scheme you've got, if you've got a defined contribution scheme, you give zakat, and otherwise you don't. So the defined contribution scheme one, it works like this then. You're going to treat it like shares. So you find out where your shares are invested, or your money is invested, and then let's say it's invested in 5 companies. For each 5 company, you have to work out how much zakat assets they have, and then you give zakat. Now that's a bit complicated for the average person. So what's the easy way? You're probably thinking the easier way is just do this. Find out how much money you've got in your pension. That money, then take 25% of it. Right. So let's say you've got £1,000 in your pension pot. Take 25% of it. 25% of 1,000 is 250, and then work out 2.5% of that. Yeah. So 2.5% of 250, and that's it. That's what you give zakat on. That's the very easy way to be able to do it. Okay. So that's it. These are the 5 things that of how you work out your zakat. Now, once you've worked out your assets, then you work out your liabilities. So the liabilities is basically anything that is outstanding, it's due basically, right? Anything you haven't paid for yet, but it's due, it's outstanding, you're supposed to pay for it. So that could be your utility bills, it could be your broadband bill, it could be, your I don't know, council tax even, maybe even money if you've got a mortgage, the minus the interest, mortgage payments, right? So whatever is outstanding, now here's where the scholars differ to what's the time window that you have where you say something's outstanding. So if you say your zakat is due on the 1st of Ramadan, then what you can do is you can use a 12-month window. So a 12-month window from the 1st of Ramadan to the next 1st of Ramadan, whatever you owe in that particular year. So, for example, all the bills that you're going to owe, which are fixed bills, you know what you owe, and all the fixed sort of like mortgage payments or fixed student loans that you're going to be paying in the 12 months, you can minus that. So you write all that down, and then you minus it from your assets, right? So you've got all your assets, your gold and silver, your cash, your business, your stocks, and your pension. You add that all up, you minus all the outstanding liabilities for the next 12 months, which you definitely know that you've got. Then whatever's left at the bottom is basically the amount of zakat that you're going to owe. Yeah. So whatever you got left, work out 2.5% of that. That's your zakat. So let me run through a dry run example of this. So I worked out my gold. I'll write that down. Worked out my cash. I worked out my, business stock, my shares, and I worked out my pension. I've written that down. Now, let's say, for example, that figure comes out to be something like £15,000, right? So £15,000 I've got assets, but at the same time, I've got liabilities, money that I owe. So I worked out the amount of outstanding money that I owe others. And I worked that out, and that works out to be, let's say, I don't know, £5,000, right? So £5,000. So 10,000 minus 5,000, or 15,000, sorry, minus 5,000 is going to give you 10,000. So now from that 10,000, I'm going to work out 2.5%. Okay, so 2.5% of 10,000 is £250. Yeah, so my zakat for this year is £250. Now I take that money and now I give it to those recipients of zakat. Very, very simple, very straightforward. And again, if you have any questions, you can ask questions. Now, when it comes to missed zakat, how do we deal with missed zakat? This is where it becomes a bit problematic. So what you have to remember is zakat, first of all, becomes necessary on a person if they are an adult, if they are sane, and if they are possessing the zakatable assets. So you have to work out when did I reach the age of puberty? So let's say I reached the age of puberty at the age of 12. So 12 months after that, 1 year passes, right? So 1 year has to pass. And I work out, did I have assets when I was at the age of puberty? Did I have assets that were greater than the threshold of zakat? If I do, then I wait 12 months, and then that's my first time I have to give zakat. Now I'm a zakat giver 12 months after I reach the age of puberty, so long as I possess the threshold of zakat. That's the most important thing that you have to remember. So all you have to do is work backwards, try to figure out, if you can, that is, when did I reach the age of puberty, and did I have roughly the amount of zakat? Now, what you can do is you can actually go back, and if you go back to National Zakat Foundation, you can actually find I think the missed zakat, uh, missed zakat, yeah. So missed zakat, have a National Zakat Foundation actually has a missed zakat that helps you work out. They got a missed zakat guide as well that actually help you with all that, the dates in the past. So, for example, I'll give you some figures that I've got. This is from some past National Zakat figures. So, for example, in 1997, right? I can't even remember what I was doing in 1997. Oh yeah, I was in college in 1997. So 1997, the threshold of zakat then was £62.21. Right. In 1998, it was £57. Fluctuates. 1999 is £61. Now, if I fast forward to, let's say, 2015, it was £188. So you can see the nisab, the threshold, has been fluctuating. It's been quite low in the past, and then it's slowly, year by year, gradually increasing. Right. So that's, I mean, this year I think it's roughly about, I mean, I'm not going to give you an exact figure, but I think it's about £320, give or take. Right. You'll have to check it out, but that's roughly. So you work out in the past if you think you had assets in those years. So I think to myself, okay, 1997, did I have assets that were more than £62 minus the liabilities? So if I think I did, then I write down, okay, this year I was supposed to give roughly this much, and then 1998 roughly this much. Now you can go through that method if you like, or the other option is what you can do is you can actually go through and you can try to overestimate. So you just figure out roughly every year, you overestimate roughly how much you think you had, and then that would be an easier way for many people, I think, right? If you want to do that. And so that's a second option. A third option, if you want to do it, is every year when you give your zakat, give extra amount in zakat that can compensate for the past years. So trying to figure out roughly overall, all of the years, how much you roughly think, a round figure of how much you owe. And then slowly, with you, every time you give zakat, just give some extra until this amount has diminished. Right. So that's basically like an easy way to kind of figure this out. Again, if you are struggling a lot with these kind of things and you have businesses and things, I would definitely encourage you to contact National Zakat Foundations. Maybe you can get like a one-to-one with one of the experts, and then they can help you break it down and go through it. It's always safe. It's always better to be safe than to be sorry later on. And that's it basically. So if there's anyone that's got any questions, inshallah, you can ask your questions.
Thank you so much, Mufti. Just very, very quickly, just on that last point, could you speak a little bit about for those who don't know their zakat date, how they can go about approximating that, and yeah, just a little bit of confusion that some people have about paying in Ramadan, or where that common misconception comes from.
So guys, excellent question. I mean, this is a very common thing that people ask. A lot of people think Ramadan and zakat come hand in hand, right? Which is actually a misconception. Zakat is actually supposed to be given, or not given, rather calculated. Zakat is supposed to be calculated the first time you actually became someone who possessed the threshold of the zakat assets. 12 months after that, on that exact date. So, for example, like today, I was working someone's out, and his daughter, she reached the age of puberty on June. I think it was 27th. June the 27th it was. And so what she now this year, she has to wait for the 27th of June, and on that date, 27th of June, she calculates her zakat now. So that obviously that's after Ramadan. So now 27th of June, or rather the lunar, apologize, you work it out according to the lunar calendar. So what you'll have to do is last year, June the 27th, what was the lunar date? What was what we call the Islamic date? And then on that fixed Islamic date, she's now going to work out her future zakat if she has the threshold year in, year out. And that's how she's going to work it out. Now, if people struggle, so I've discussed this with some scholars, Mufti Faraz and others. If people do struggle with working out the lunar, like How do you work it out? What do you do in that situation? So the other option is like this. You fix for yourself a date which you're going to remember. Right? You can't remember exactly when you became a person who possessed the threshold. So fix yourself a date. Like choose a date. For example, choose the 10th of Ramadan. Right? Choose the 10th of Ramadan, and then on the 10th of Ramadan, or whatever date you want, work out your zakat and then overestimate slightly just to be on the safe side, and then keep your date as the 10th of Ramadan. This is only for those people who can't figure out when they became people eligible to give zakat, right? Or
Yeah.
yeah, they find it hard. Now, if there is someone who obviously again is struggling a lot, then I would definitely say speak to a scholar about your situation. It's always best to speak to a scholar, get the confusion out, and you'll feel much better, inshallah.
Inshallah. I'm just going to go into the questions from the comments now. The first one was, generally speaking, do you need to pay zakat on the maintenance loan provided by Student Finance England? For example, if I have been given a 3K loan, do I need to pay zakat on that 3K cash? However, there are conditions which need to be fulfilled before we start paying back the loan.
Okay, so this is a good question. It's a common question that people ask. I mean, my own personal view on this would be that if there's a person who has received, I don't know, some sort of um, a maintenance fee or some bursary or something which they have to pay back later on, if you've been given that money and you know that amount of money is most likely going to be used up for your needs for that particular university year, then you wouldn't have to give zakat on it, because the rule is that anything which is outstanding, like we say, liability, and students generally know within that 12 months there are so many things that they have to pay for, fees they have to pay for, or rent they have to pay for, and other things. So I would generally say you wouldn't have to give zakat on that if you definitely know that it's going to be used up in that particular year for the purpose that you've taken it. Yeah.
Sorry, second question. This was around the zakat on business assets. So we have a question saying, is inventory based on the cost or the retail value when you're calculating?
Okay, so when it comes to inventory, business inventory, generally, if you have the item priced and tagged, we say you have to give the zakat on the retail value. So whatever you've priced it at, that's basically, so if you got, let's say, for example, 10 mobile phones, you put it up onto your website, then those 10 mobile phones, each one, let's say it's worth £500. So 500 times 10. Again, I'm not that good at maths, but I can work this one out. So 5,000. So then you'd work out 2.5% of that 5,000, right? Simple as that. If, however, you haven't tagged it, it's not something which you've decided what the price is going to be, you can use the wholesale value. So whatever you purchased it at, you can use that as the value, and then you work out 2.5% of that. If the stock is dead stock, then whatever the current value of that dead stock is, you just give the 2.5% of its value.
Okay, inshallah. We have one question. What about NFT and crypto? Do we pay zakat on the price they were bought or the current price based on the market, regardless if they have gone down or up in value?
Okay, so when it comes to NFTs and cryptocurrency, again, with regards to cryptocurrency, what I would suggest is if you read, because this requires a lot of explanation, if you read Mufti Faraz actually has a book on zakat, the fiqh of zakat. I actually got it somewhere here. And in there, he has a whole section where he breaks down all the various types of crypto, right? And he explains what types of crypto actually falls under the ruling of an asset and what doesn't fall under an asset. That's the first thing I would say. Generally, I would say something like Bitcoin, maybe even Ethereum, would probably fall under like the same ruling as cash, I would say.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is when it comes to, for example, like the other assets, if you've purchased them simply for sale, so you want to purchase them because you're waiting and then you're going to sell them, then you give the value of them according to inventory. So they're treated like inventory basically, right? So if you've got some crypto and you bought them at, let's say you got £100 worth of crypto in there, I would say just work out 2.5% of £100, right? And NFTs, again, NFTs is the same thing. If you bought the NFTs with the intention of selling them immediately, short term, then you'd have to give the value on the 2.5% of the entire value of the NFT. And if, however, the NFT is there for, I don't know, you want it for a long term, you want to keep it for yourself or whatever, then that's fine. And you wouldn't have to give zakat on it. It's basically just like like buying yourself a laptop or buying yourself some other item, inshallah.
Inshallah. And lastly, this was a question around zakat on shares. Why can't we just give zakat on the current value of the shares?
Yeah, you can give the zakat on the current value if you like. That would be an overestimate. That's fine. So if you have shares and your shares are worth, let's say, I don't know, £10,000. If you want to give zakat on £10,000, 2.5% of 10,000, totally fine. You can do that.
Yeah.
However, maybe there might be someone who might not want to give that much. Like they want to be a bit accurate in how much, because not all shares are zakatable. That's the thing to remember. I remember when I worked out the shares of one of my friends, he had shares in BT, and I worked out his zakat, and it was literally 0.00 something, because BT didn't have much liquid assets and they didn't have much inventory. But yeah, you can do that.
Okay. And just lastly, this is just from questions that I've seen come up again and again. One common one is, do you have to pay the exact amount, or can you pay more? And what's the, I guess, ruling on paying more, and what's that counted as? If you just could clarify for anyone watching.
So when it comes to giving your zakat, remember there's two things. The date on which you calculate your zakat is very important. You have to calculate your zakat on that particular day. That's important. Giving your zakat, you can give it whenever you like. Obviously before you die, hopefully, but try to give your zakat as soon as possible. How much of the zakat you give, you must give the amount that's been calculated on that particular date. But if you want to give more the merrier. You can give more if you like. It's fine. It's totally fine. It's actually encouraged in Islam to actually support the needy financially more than what's actually mandatory on you. So it'd be definitely something which would be recommended, but not necessary.
Okay. Thank you for that. That comes to the end of our questions. Thank you so much for your time, Mufti Liaqat. I was very glad to learn that I'm 10% owner of LZ International today. I can put that on my CV now,
And
inshallah.
I'm amazed that I'm the owner of LZ.
We'll have a chat later about how that's structured, inshallah. Thank you for everyone who's listening in. If you do have questions, I will share the links to NZF's Ask a Question service. We have free consultations with muftis that you can book, where you can have a one-on-one conversation. As Mufti Liaqat mentioned, if you have a kind of trickier financial situation that you want to get cleared up. In terms of zakat, we have slots still available for this month of Ramadan, but do book them quickly, as they do get booked up quite quickly towards the end of the month, as well, as you can imagine. So I'll share that information for you. But I'm sure we've got a lot of helping to do in the kitchen at this time of the evening. So I'll let everyone get back to that, inshallah. And Mufti Liaqat, thank you again for your time. And inshallah, speak again soon. Take care. Wa alaikum assalam. I'm just going to share the links to the NZF consultations in the comments now. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.